The Florida Podcast Network, the voice of Florida.
Welcome to episode 15 of the Florida Podcasting News Show on the Florida Podcast Network. Florida Podcasting News keeps you on the inside of Florida's podcasting industry.
On today's episode, we'll be catching up in Florida news with the last two interviews we recorded at Podcast Movement in Orlando, speaking with two of our favorite podcasters that we get to see at these conferences. We'll share an interview with James Van Prooyen, founder of the Military Podcast Network, and he's a local boy from Tampa. Then we'll introduce you to Kerry-Ann Reid-Brown, my sister from another mister. Happy early birthday, Kerry-Ann. She is the host of Carry-On Friends and the founder of Breadfruit Media. And she brought two of her associates, Mikelah Rose of Style and Vibes, and Rachel along with her. And so you'll also hear from Mikelah Rose in that interview.
Then in general podcasting news, we'll talk to Kelly Forst, Marketing Communications Specialist at AWeber, about their Beyond the Podcast 2019 Virtual Summit, which is set for September 18th. And then, as always, we'll share our latest in Florida Podcast Network news. And to close the show, we normally have a podcasting tip, but today we're going to talk about hurricane tip because, you know, this little thing called Dorian has been threatening us, making us all anxious and irritable, and we thought we'd act like an actual news show and share tips on hurricane preparedness from WeatherNation. This episode is brought to you by Flintstone Media. Thanks for joining us.
This is Jemmy.
And this is Glenn. Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Florida Podcasting News Show. And we are recording this on Saturday as the hurricane is sitting off the coast, and we're finding out it may miss us, but who knows, it'll change its mind 55 more times before the next 3 days is up. We've been talking every day because your bug out plan, because it was going to come right over your house originally, literally right over your house. It
was pretty much headed right for us.
Yeah, I mean, you were going to be in the eye the way that was targeting.
I know. Yeah. Hopefully, it decides to still not hit me. I'm really, really hoping.
It's like that bully in high school when he is 6'8" and weighs 300 pounds. He can pretty much do what he wants at that point.
Do what he wants.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, let's get to the show.
Tell us the latest with the IPA. What's going on with them? I accidentally got caught at my parents' house for dinner the other night and missed our latest official board meeting. So
excuses.
So
International Podcast Association. There's not a lot new. We're working on putting things together. We're hoping to launch the beginning of the year. So sometime in January, February with the Kickstarter, but we still need people to take the survey. And I know a lot of you have. We've had hundreds of responses. So if you could go to internationalpodcastassociation.org/survey, we would appreciate that and take the survey. It takes 10 minutes. And we really want to know what the needs of our potential membership down the line are, what your needs are as a podcaster. And that's what the survey is all about. So it really helps us help you. So right now, I would say take the survey. Also, reach out to Glenn at horseradionetwork.com or Jemmy at floridapodcastnetwork.com and let us know if you would like to help on a committee. And we're starting to put lists of people together who would like to help in the organization of the thing. So we also need help with that.
And we've not only gotten a pretty good number of responses so far to the survey, but you were saying that we've gotten some pretty good answers too. So
very lengthy, intelligent answers, and then some really silly ones. Like somebody posted in there, and I wonder if this was you. Somebody posted in there that there needs to be more horse shows in the podcast world. And I'm like, I do 17. What do they want? I
have a feeling it was someone being snarky. It had to have been someone being snarky.
You're trying to kill me here.
Oh, man. Well, anyways, this show comes out on the 1st and 15th of every month. And also on the 15th of the month, there's a newsletter that accompanies it. So if you'd like to get your hands on that, go to floridapodcastingnews.com.
You're doing a good job with that, too.
Thank you.
Well, first up in Florida industry news.
Wait. No. Before you get to whatever you're about to introduce, which I'm assuming is James.
You wrote on the page.
I have a bit of Florida industry news myself that I need to shove in here real quick. So Mystic Mikelah Firester, a South Florida local, she had her new podcast, Know
Mystic?
Your Aura.
Like
Mystic.
Yeah.
Mystic? Okay. Oh, yeah. Her new podcast is called Know Your Aura. She's an aura reader. Glenn. How
What's
cool
an
is that?
aura?
An aura is like your energy field, and
okay.
it presents itself in different colors, and based on it tells her, not me because I don't see them, but it tells her a lot about
You
who
have
you
to
are.
be fiery red, the red of flames.
No.
No?
And I don't know how to feel about that, but no, I'm actually apparently a very blue aura. I'm very empathetic. So I'm a
Has
healer.
she met you?
Yes. Moving on. So anyways, the reason that this is news is because her new podcast, Know Your Aura, was featured in Cosmopolitan before it even debuted, Glenn. Like,
how'd she get in Cosmopolitan?
her manager, aka her husband Scott, is amazing. I suppose it was his doing. I don't know. But here's the thing. The reason she has such a great following is because she's become like an aura reader to the stars. So she reads the auras of different celebrities and stuff. It's like perfectly in line with the Cosmo
So she
crowd.
was already
Right?
a semi-celebrity before.
It's so So she was on like the what was it, Ben and Kelly Pickler show or whatever it's called.
Yeah,
I don't know.
that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So guess who's her producer, Glenn?
Well, I know you are because I've seen pictures of you and the Mystic together.
It's me.
She wears normal clothes too. I was expecting to see like a flowery.
No, she's totally chill, but she is the real deal. So her show, I just want encourage everyone to go and subscribe because it literally just debuted this past Friday, August 30th. And the first episode is really cool. They did an FAQ. So it was like, frequently asked questions of Mikelah, and answered all kinds of questions with her husband, Scott. And so they're so funny. And so, like I said, it just debuted. Glenn, I can't even tell you, the numbers are already insane on that.
So being
on
in
that
Cosmopolitan does help.
It does help. So, wow, congratulations on a solid
Well, that
start.
answers one question. We always wondered if you get mainstream press, does it help? Apparently it helps.
It helps. Yeah. But I mean, she also has a really good following already, especially on Instagram. So if you want to follow her too, it's at Mystic Mikelah. I'll put a link in the show notes. But yeah, so go to mysticmikelah.com and also go to flintstonemedia.com/mm for Mystic Mikelah Cosmo. So flintstonemedia.com/mm Cosmo for the article on Mystic Mikelah in Cosmo. She's just so fantastic. I absolutely adore her. So congratulations on a solid start, Mystic Mikelah.
Great. Let's hear from James Van Prooyen of Tampa, founder of the Military Podcast Network, with a certain somebody might have help him get started a couple of years ago.
I have a feeling I know who that certain someone was. Glenn. So we are on the expo floor for Podcast Movement 2019 here in Orlando, Florida. That has landed, and I have found one of my favorite people who I've had the pleasure of knowing you, James, for quite a few years now. But one thing I didn't realize is just how long you've been involved with Podcast Movement and seeing it grow. So how have you seen this event grow over the years?
Yeah, Jimmy, I think 2017, probably March at Podfest, you and I met. Mm-hmm. And then just a little bit after that, Podcast Movement in Anaheim was our first time.
That's right.
Together
That's right. Good memory. Look at you. That's what you do. I love it.
So it's interesting to see. It's like a reunion. Like for me, it felt pretty big the first year I went because I was really new into going to any kind of conferences. And I was just retiring, getting out of the military. So it was all this craziness.
Yes.
It was new to me, but to see people that we know and their growth and the industry's growth and everything that was talked about years ago when I first started, like 2014, I heard about where podcasting was going, and to see these things developing it's crazy.
It's kind of
cool.
mind-boggling, right? Especially when you're here on the expo floor looking out at all the companies that have sprung up and really are supporting this industry and figuring out ways to help it grow and squeeze all the chunk change you can out of this thing. It's been a crazy time. So, first of all, we need to explain the sound of your voice because it doesn't always sound like this. So why does your voice sound like this, James?
Actually, I'll say this. I may or may not should have gone to karaoke last night.
The after party.
After 4 days of basically networking all day, every day.
I mean, these events are intense, and then they throw parties at us every night. We're like, oh my God. So tell everybody about your background in podcasting. Let us know who you are and what you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. I got in, like I said, in this craziness, started getting ideas between 2015 and 2016. Now looking back, it wasn't that many conferences, but it felt like going to Podcast Movement year 2, I was like, I can't go back to Podcast Movement without a podcast. So that actually pushed me to record and launch the first show I recorded, which is called the Ragnar Life Podcast. Ragnar Relay is a 2-day, some people view as intense running.
I would view it as intense. I'm what you might call pre-beginner.
And that's why we do the podcast, is really to show that anybody of all backgrounds, walks of life can run that race.
Okay.
Run, walk, jog. There's been all kinds
of as I would probably be doing.
Jog, but it's a really cool community. So many great stories, and as you know, as a podcaster, it's just getting those good stories out there.
Of course. Now you have the military.
So then I kind of went back towards what I came from. I knew I wanted to get in business the whole time I was in the military, but I didn't know what I would do. So I was listening to podcasts, getting a lot of value out of business and self-development podcasts. So I wanted to niche into the military space for veterans business. So I do a podcast called the Veterans in Business Show as well.
Wonderful.
And of course, you're affiliated with Horse Radio Network. And when I heard Glenn talking about podcast network concepts, I was like, what better space in the military to do a podcast network?
Absolutely.
And when I talked to another person that we know, Neil Galerte, and I was kind of trying to come up with a name. He's like, just call it what it is. I was like, Military Podcast Network.
There you go. Well, what I love about what you're doing with that, you have such a passion for helping people, and that comes across in everything you do, from building the network, and you're creating a space for a voice for the veterans and advocacy and all that. And then, I'm walking through the expo hall, and it's like every 5 minutes I get a tap on the shoulder from James. Hey, I wanted to meet this person. Oh, hey, I wanted to meet this person. Hey, so you're so good at making those connections, and it's clear how much you care about people. Where does that come from, and where do you want to take your career here?
That's interesting. I don't, as I look back, don't know. I did this a lot in the military, but it was just, I deployed a lot, I traveled a lot, so it was easy to think, hey, you just never know. I'm a relational person, so it was harder, years ago to stay in touch with people because you had to call them on the telephone. It was a lot harder, email and those kind of things. There wasn't social media early on in my military career.
Right.
So now with the ability to talk to people and go to a lot of these things and meet people that are in this industry or similar industries, I watched Chris Kermitzos do it, as I was getting out. He's kind of what I would view as a mentor, and volunteered and helped him at a lot of his events locally, which turned into Podfest and Podcast Movement now for me coming.
Yeah, so you see the evolution of both of those amazing events, yeah.
So to me, it's just leading with values, serve first, as Pat Flynn says, that I really love. So it's...
As you carry his book in your hand.
I just love to connect with people. So.
Well, I jumped in on his live video yesterday. He was so gracious. He's like, called me over. I'm like, yeah, I'll jump in. So nice. Well, anyway, thank you, James, so much. It's always a pleasure to see you at these events. There's certain people that when I come, I really hope I'm going to see, and that make me feel like, oh, yeah, I'm back home. So you're one of those people. Thank you so much,
and
James.
Thank you. It's so awesome to see your development and your growth, and to remember this, your story of where you came from in a way of how you got into all this craziness as well. So
it's been craziness.
It's exciting to watch. You're so awesome, Jamie. So it's from one valuable person to another.
Oh, thank you, James.
And finally, we have our last Podcast Movement interview. Kerry-Ann Reid-Brown of Carry-On Friends and Breadfruit Media, and her friend Mikelah Rose of Style and Vibes joined us for lunch on the last day of PM19 and recorded this interview with us. Glenn and I both met Kerry-Ann at Podcast Movement 2017 when it was Anaheim, California. So it was so great to see her again, and this time in Orlando. Let's hear what's been going on with Kerry-Ann.
Well, I am sitting here with my sister from another mister.
Yes.
Miss Kerry-Ann Reid of Kerry-On Friends.
Kerry-Ann Reid-Brown. You're forgetting the other part. It's a long name.
It's such a complicated name.
Double hyphenated.
I have a very short memory.
It's
By
okay.
the time I get to the last final syllables, I'm done.
It's okay, because guess what? The guy from Google asked me, is this a common thing with Jamaicans? Because Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce, the Olympian, has double hyphenated. Shelly-Ann, Kerry-Ann,
It's what's wrong with y'all?
I don't know. We don't make it easy.
And you don't make it easy because the name of your show is a homonym for your first name, but it's also spelled differently.
I know.
What is your name of your show?
Kerry-Ann Friends, the Caribbean American podcast.
And it's Carry, like you would expect regularly to be spelled. Carry for Carry-On Friends.
Yes.
Okay, so it is a Caribbean-based lifestyle show. Tell us about Carry-On Friends.
Okay. So Carry-On Friends is where you come and hear others share their experience of the Caribbean American experience and how much that is similar or dissimilar to their own experiences. So it's almost like the representation and finding that common ground in wherever you are, whichever state. Yeah. Everyone seems to feel like they have that same experience.
It's true. There's a lot that we have in common. It's kind of crazy.
In fact, you're in Florida. I'm in New York, and we have similar experiences.
Exactly. And we first met 2 years ago at Podcast Movement when it was in Anaheim, California. I called myself the stage manager. It was just an elevated title for I mic'd people up and de-mic'd them when they were done. But it was for this event called PMX, and you were one of the speakers.
Yes.
So that's the first time I ever saw you. And to hear you talking about wanting to focus your podcast and podcasting on the Caribbean culture, it really spoke to me. So, of course, afterwards, I was like, hey, girlfriend.
And we're like, people's family.
And then we started talking about like, whoa, we really have like a ridiculous amount in common.
Yes.
And then your line of questioning to me was about how you saw the future of your podcasting career and developing, a network and stuff. And I remember I was starting to answer the questions, right? And the answers were coming out of my mouth. And I realized, wait a minute, my answers are really my mentor's answers. So why don't I just bring you to the source?
Yes.
So then I dragged you across the hall.
Yes.
To meet Glenn the Geek.
Yes.
And so you got to meet Glenn here a couple of years ago at Podcast Movement in Anaheim. And so, Glenn, what was your first impressions of Carrie? I'm putting you on the spot. What were your first impressions of Carrie-Ann?
It was good because I tend to have an ability to spot who I think is talented and who really wants to do it. And I think that's the key in podcasting. You have to want to do it.
Yeah.
And you wanted to do it.
Yes.
I mean, you had some issues you ran into, just like every podcaster does at some point in their journey. And it was just a matter of overcoming those issues and having the knowledge to overcome those issues.
Yeah.
And you did. 2 years later, you're still here.
Yes. And the funny thing is, Carry-On Friends, the Caribbean American podcast, was just Carry-On Friends. After talking to Glenn, it became Carry-On Friends, the Caribbean American podcast.
Extended that branding for you, really put it in people's faces.
Make it very clear.
Yeah.
And the conversation with Glenn was really the wind that I needed, because I was in a place where I felt I was in a circle, or I was around people that really didn't get podcasting, and they weren't in a niche the way I was and Glenn is, and was able to speak to the nuances of being in a niche.
You were in a bubble and there was no one else in there with you.
Exactly. And which is also my experience with Carry-On Friends. Why people listen, because we have such a unique culture. Not everyone's speaking to that culture.
Right.
And the value that my audience finds in me putting that in a podcast was the value that I found in Glenn, who has a niche and experience that, listen, whatever other bigger podcast does, we can't do that. So this is what it is. So
exactly.
It's really, paying forward, it's Glenn's paying forward to me what I pay forward to my audience.
There you go. So, all right. So in 2 years ago, let's rewind our brains a little bit, and walking away from those conversations, walking away from Podcast Movement and your vision and your list of action items and what you saw you're going to do from now 2 years later, having lived the last 2 years, what has actually come of it? How was it different than what you actually envisioned when you were leaving Podcast Movement 2 years ago? Let's talk about a little bit of the change that you've experienced.
So when I spoke with Glenn, he dropped a lot of things.
As he does, known to do.
But I only got 15 minutes of his time, and the accountability was I had to be consistent. He was watching me. He's like, I'm going to watch to make sure you do an episode every 2 weeks, as you said you were supposed to do. And I was like, oh my God.
Does that sound familiar,
yes.
Jimmy?
Nope, never have it. Go ahead.
So I knew he was watching. I'm like, I got to do it. And then after a while, I didn't care so much he was watching, because then that really jump-started the motivation to continue. Got back into the groove. And I just started to make adjustments, because I was pregnant at the time. So I was like, okay, there's so much I could do. I could prepare for baby. But I knew I had maternity leave coming up. And this is my third kid. And as
you got this.
When baby's asleep, we do work.
Right. At that point, it's the first kid's job to take care of the third one.
Really, it truly is. Earn their keep.
Right.
And And what happened was things started to take a life of their own. I had questions that I didn't get to ask you or Glenn. And it was in retrospect, that's a good idea because there are certain things you have to figure out on your own, what works for you. And I realized that in network, how it was defined, because I didn't really get that clarity until we spoke again this year. But network, I defined it like, oh my God, I have to go out and create all these shows and produce all these shows. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be owning people's show. And then I realized that that was more of the administrative work that comes naturally to me. And I wanted to fuel the creative side and the strategic side. And I said, how about people just pay me to produce the shows? They own it. And if they want to leave, they leave, and it won't be an ugly divorce, you know? And I started doing that, and I was like, yeah, this feels good. This feels really good. And then I got really clear on what I wanted the podcast industry for Caribbean podcasts to look like. And I looked at what you and Glenn did. I didn't know possibilities existed. So I was like, do one show. I'm like, what? Glenn has like 18. Why am I still trying to do one show and fit everything in one show? So since then, I've explored the possibility of starting a new show. I'll be starting a new show with my co-host sitting over there. And
we'll get to her in a minute.
Yeah. And, you know, like seeing that possibility, like so many more opportunities and possibilities that I didn't see. So right now I have the production company and
Breadfruit
Media. And then I'm doing the podcast directory, which I started initially and had it on Breadfruit Media, but the vision grew so much and I'm like, I have to take it from Breadfruit Media and give it its own home, which we're in the process of like building out and launching soon. And then the network is still in play after our conversation. So it's not a straight line, but all the pieces are coming together. And that's really amazing. And even more clarity now.
Right. So this podcast movement experience, I knew from the moment I saw you again was going to be very different. And I knew that because, you know, you were not here by yourself.
Yeah. I brought friends.
You brought friends.
Yes.
So you are Kerry-Ann friend. I mean, it like goes right into your whole thing, right?
Bring some
you
friends
bring her right along with you. You brought Rachel and you brought Mikelah, and Michaela's still, Rachel, I almost said Michaela's still with us, like something's happened to Rachel. Rachel's fine. But Michaela's sitting with us today. And so let's turn a little bit I'm going to have you introduce Mikelah and tell us a little about her show. And then Mikelah, I'd like to hear about your experience now coming to PM for the first time with Kerry-Ann.
Okay. So Mikelah Rose of the Style and Vibes podcast, I met her a few years ago through another friend, and we started just collaborating. I think we met in the library and was just talking about tips and strategy for her show. And that grew into accountability partnership that grew into a friendship. And then we stopped really keeping each other accountable, and because all we did was just talk and text all day. And I wanted her to move into WhatsApp because I can't search the text anymore because it's so long. But, we talked about her doing a podcast because I think we've been on about 10 or a lot of episodes of podcasts together that were just mostly on my shows. So since then, it was just like, you need this platform. It's a good brand extension. I see the vision very clearly for herself. And also because I started to look into what Glenn and you had said about the network and started looking out what was missing. And said, there is no show like yours, which is a lifestyle show in terms of music, entertainment, and fashion. And it aligns with her brand. It's not like, oh, you know, I bake cake and I'm over here selling cars. It really was really aligned. And I think that people wanted to experience her in a new way. And so, she was concerned about the work. But you know how us Virgos do, and very organized, meticulous people do, and very, gave her a list, a checklist, and I'm like, this is what I want, and this is when I want it, and this is how I usually do the intro, this is how you should feel, gave her tips, and she was able to just launch, and she's been doing really well. I look at the comments and the success of her show, and, like last week when she got into the new Apple category of music commentary, I called her and I was like, go into your phone, browse. And I was like, scroll all the way down. And she's like, whoa. And I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. I was running around the parking lot and they were like, I'm assuming you're excited. So I'm very excited about her growth. And so Mikelah is here.
Yeah, so I mean, just being here for the first time, thanks to Kerry for having me on the fireside chat. We talked about from patois to Creole, so represented the Caribbean culture. I thought was really amazing. Anytime I get to represent, I always love to, just because I think it's important for us to see ourselves in multiple ways, from, you know, not just in entertainment, but understanding the business side of what's happening. And it was really my first experience really tapping into the business of podcasting. So that's really what I'm really walking away from podcast movements this year, making slight tweaks, but understanding that I'm on the right path to growing the podcast in the way that I think is feasible, you know, step by step, brick by brick.
On our show, one thing we really like to do is provide our listeners, all of our listeners are their fellow podcasters, the people who are thinking about getting into podcast industry. So we like to impart some tips, and I want to pull two things out of this conversation specifically for them. Mm-hmm. Number one, if you are considering going and creating a show within a niche, right? It can take a lot of work, and it's going to be a very long haul effort.
Yeah. Long game.
But believe that what is happening is you are trying to serve an underserved audience.
Yes.
And that audience does exist. You just have to work hard to figure out how to find it. So that's number one. Don't get discouraged, right?
Yes.
And number two is that coming to conferences like Podcast Movement, like Podfest, like FinCon, like or meetup groups, or establishing friendships with people that you can now bounce ideas off of, whether it's structured networking or more social networking, that having that group of support can make such a big difference.
It does.
So I want to pass the torch to you and ask you, what is a tip that you'd like to provide our listeners?
I think the one thing that I think people get carried away with is...
No pun intended.
That's
too sorry.
I love track and field. Just go with me for a second.
I will. I'm on it. I'm on the train. Let's take us there.
When everyone knows Usain Bolt, right? Mm-hmm. And we've all went through the same process he went through. I mean, we just didn't become professional runners, right? We've been all running track. And they will tell you, when you're running your race, your eyes forward. I can't be looking in the guy in lane 1, 2, 3 or the other lane over. You got to focus on your lane, because when you start looking in other people's lane, it slows you down. So you got to focus on your race. You got to run your race. And you know what? His time is his time. You have people coming in 5th and 6th, and that's their season's best.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And so you have to focus on your personal record, your personal best, and not that Usain broke a world record. Because before Usain became Usain, he didn't even finish the second round at Olympics past. So he got to a certain point. So you got to focus on where you are and being good where you are. And so you could build to become the best you are in the future. So,
all right. Yeah. That's wonderful. Okay. So, one last little bit from Mikelah. Mikelah, please share your website. Where can people find you?
styleandvibes.com. All the links are there. You can download the show. You can listen. You can see the podcast and all the other stuff that I have going on.
Kerry-Ann.
Where can they find
Reid-Brown.
me? All right. I'm getting used to, leading with Breadfruit Media first, because that's where we're growing, right? Breadfruitmedia.com. Right. And also carryonfriends.com. And you'll find everything there. On Breadfruit Media, you'll also find Style and Vibes, but breadfruitmedia.com and carryonfriends.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Flintstone Media has been the digital bedrock of several Florida brands and businesses. Serving as a highly resourceful podcast production house, work with a leader in Florida's podcasting industry and add a podcast to your brand's content offerings. From setup through recording and distribution, Jemmy will lend her experience producing over 500 episodes and make the process of creating your show simple and easy for you. Visit flintstonemedia.com for podcast samples. That's flintstonemedia.com. And next, we turn our attention away from the latest podcast conference in Florida to a virtual podcast conference for general podcasting news. We recently got to meet Kelly Forst, marketing communication specialist at AWeber. You've seen them at all the conferences, who told us about their upcoming Beyond the Podcast 2019 virtual summit.
Well, as you've heard, we've just been at a conference in person, speaking to some more of our friends there, but we'll take you now to a conference. If you can't always attend them in person, sometimes they pop up that they're virtual, and we're so excited to welcome Kelly Forst, who is the Marketing and Communications Specialist with AWeber, and she's going to tell us all about their new conference that's coming up September 18th called Beyond the Summit, and it features a few friends of ours. Hello, Kelly.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you so much for coming on. I can't wait to hear all about this. When this popped into my email box, I was like, oh, this is very intriguing, because I remember not always being able to attend the conferences I wanted to attend. So I know that there are a lot of people still in this boat. Was that AWeber's motivation for putting this together?
Yes, exactly. So we're so excited to host our second annual Beyond the Podcast Virtual Summit. It really gives us a chance to connect virtually with podcasters. It's held this year on September 18th from 11 a.m. until about 3 p.m. Eastern. And we're so excited about our incredible lineup of speakers this year who are all podcasting experts, ready and eager to share their expertise specifically on marketing and monetizing podcasts.
Now, as Glenn was mentioning before we started recording, a lot of your lineup, they're friends of ours. I don't know about you, Glenn. I'm jealous. Are you jealous? I'm jealous. So tell us about this lineup.
Sure. So you'll recognize a lot of these names. Dave Jackson, who's host of the School of Podcasting. He'll be offering his advice to podcasters, talking about why having a niche is so important. Mark Asquith, CEO and co-founder of Rebel Base Media. He's going to be joining to talk to us about his podcast discovery triangle and how he uses email marketing. Tracy DeForge is founder and CEO of Produce Your Podcast and host of Journey to There. She offers some really awesome insight. Harry Duran, founder of Fullcast, will be talking about how to make your show profitable and what channels he's found success on. Andrea Jones, who's CEO of Savvy Social School, is talking about how to use social media more effectively. I think that's a question that a lot of podcasters have, is how to use social media. And finally, Kathy Heller, who's the host of Don't Keep Your Day Job podcast, is going to be sharing her experience with podcasting and why you should pursue your passion. So all of these topics are great for podcasters, whether you're a current podcaster and you just want to learn more and connect with others, or if you're an aspiring podcaster and you want to learn from the ground up, then this event's for you.
This sounds fantastic. And one of the things that honestly I'm liking about this the most is having come back from Podcast Movement, how intense it was. There are like 18 different tracks you have to choose from. And so it's kind of nice to have it be very, very simple. There are 6 people. You just sit there and you get to listen to each one. It's a brilliant idea. How long has this taken for you guys to put this together?
We've been working on it for a few months now. It's been all hands on board here at the marketing team at AWeber.
Awesome. So AWeber, I know you guys always have a booth at the podcast conferences. You can always find AWeber on the expo floor. But AWeber, you guys are experts in email marketing and e-blasts and all of that kind of fun stuff. So let's bridge the gap for people who might be wondering, how does email marketing contribute to building your podcast and your podcast career? If you could do that for me, that'd be great.
Sure, absolutely. So like you said, AWeber is an email marketing and automation platform. We're built specifically for small businesses and entrepreneurs. We've been around for 20 years. We've helped over 1 million small business owners around the world connect with their audiences. And of course, part of that is podcasters. Podcasters are small business owners to an extent. And we have the know-how and the ability to help podcasters grow. And that's why we've wanted to put on the summit for podcasters for the past couple of years. We're always out and about at podcasting events like Podcast Movement, PodFest, Sheep Podcasts. You'll find our booth at any of these expos. But we've made it our mission to empower podcasters to pursue deeper relationships with their listeners by providing a platform for education and community. And that's ultimately what we want to do with Beyond the Podcast Virtual Summit.
Very nice. And speaking of community, I mean, you guys, there's a virtual pass for this summit, and it gives access to the private online community. So, and actually they can actually interact with some of these awesome speakers. So what is that experience going to be like, and what's the value that people can expect from that private online community?
Yeah. So when you sign up for Beyond the Podcast Virtual Summit, it is free, by the way. You just have to sign up online at beyondthepodcastsummit.com. And then you can join our Facebook group. We'll have a link to it right in that landing page where you can click join our Facebook community. We have thousands of podcasters in that community currently talking about podcasting, what they're hoping to learn from the summit. We'll be manning the group during the summit, answering questions and fostering some communication about what our speakers are talking about.
So I encourage everybody to sign up with your email marketing. Speaking of which, how do people get on your mailing list?
Sure. You can go to beyondthepodcastsummit.com. By registering, you'll be signing up to receive all of our emails about Beyond the Podcast Summit. Or you can go to AWeber.com if you're interested in learning more about email marketing.
Well, Jemmy, you got a job.
It's about damn time.
I know. The entire time I've known you, you've never worked. So you actually did get a job as an instructor at a college.
I know. It's
a part-time job. But
I mean, they actually are entrusting me with the future minds of America. That's a heavy deal,
you
man.
are highly educated, though.
Oh, well, thank you. So yeah, I get to be an instructor at the Connecticut School of Broadcasting, and I'm so excited about it.
What are you instructing on?
Well, I'm actually going to be the first ever podcasting instructor.
Wait a minute. The Connecticut School of Broadcasting is hiring you to instruct on podcasting?
Yes. And just so everybody knows, this is not like a long distance job or something. I don't have to commute to Connecticut. They actually have, I think, like 11 different campuses, and a couple of them are in Florida. Two actually by me, but I'll be teaching at the one in Pembroke Pines, which is technically their Miami location. And yeah, I'll be their first ever podcasting instructor. I'm so excited to do it. If you remember, I got to do a presentation there with our good friend, Danny Pena, and I think it was in June or July. I think June. And he was doing a presentation. He invited me to come in and help out with it and participate. And so we presented podcasting to a few dozen people. And then I got a call from the director saying, hey, we have this instructor position we need to fill. Would you be up for it? I'm like, sure, count me in. Let's do this. And so, so I'll be an instructor. I'm very excited.
Well, they must have been impressed with your presentation.
I hope so. Either that or they're desperate. I haven't decided.
They couldn't find anybody else. You think that's it?
Anybody else?
Well, congratulations. That is exciting.
Thank you.
That's a lot of fun.
Thank you.
But and apparently the International Podcast Day couldn't find anybody else either, because they've asked you to come back.
I know. I'm floored by these different invitations and phone calls that I've been getting. Quite a few of them recently, and I'm so blessed and appreciative of every single one. And so when Dave Lee reached out a few weeks ago and asked me to participate in International Podcast Day again, I was like, absolutely. And what's really cool, so last time I did it 2 years ago, I did it about the Florida podcasting scene. So if you want to go and check that out, all the information is still up on flintstonemedia.com. But this time I'm going to be talking about networks and networking, because those are really the kings of collaboration and making your podcast even bigger and better, and, making yourself a better podcaster. And so I'll be talking about the benefits of collaboration and building a successful podcast network. We have a little bit of experience doing that, you and I, and the benefits of being part of one. And then just also about building a network of support for yourself in the industry, through meetups and conferences and all that kind of stuff. And then how you can take your network and invite them into the show and make them part of your creative process. And so I'm going to be talking about all of that with some special guests. As always, I love to bring people into the conversation. And so I've already roped you in, and it's going to be official now, Glenn, because it's going to be unrecorded. You are going to be part of the conversation.
Did I agree? I wasn't sure.
You are right now. Just say, yes, Jemmy, I will do it.
I guess I'll come.
Yay! So everybody, that'll be on September 30th, and my hour, it's a 24-hour live broadcast. It's so cool. And you can watch it at internationalpodcastday.com/live. Go there right now, actually, and check out all the different speakers, but definitely check in at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for my presentation. And I can't wait to see, I hope everybody gets to tune in and learn something. It's going to be very, very exciting. You can also go to flintstonemedia.com/IPD for more information. Alrighty, so as we mentioned at the top of the show, we normally have this space reserved for a good, solid podcasting tip, whether it's about how to podcast or the business of podcasting. We try to open up our brains for you every single episode. And on this episode, with Hurricane Dorian just barreling down, and he has his sights set on Florida.
Is it a she or a he?
It's a he, and I figured it out because they actually swap the names back and forth, male to female, with every single letter. And then it also flips every year. And so I thought back 2 years ago, okay, this is me being hyper geeky. I thought back 2 years ago and I'm like, Irma, okay, so Irma was a girl, she's an I. And then I realized, and then that meant that at the time, D was a boy. And so if that's 2 years ago, then this year also D would be a boy. So Dorian is a boy. So with Dorian having his sights set on us, we need to all be prepared and take these kind of things seriously. And so even if you're out of the cone of uncertainty and you're in the clear, these are all tips that are good for any future hurricane. And so we decided to pull this little clip from WeatherNationTV.com on assembling your Go Kit.
Sometimes hurricanes can form and intensify without much advanced warning. This is why it is important to be prepared long before the storm strikes. A big part of being prepared is having an easy-to-carry survival kit ready to go, referred to as a Go Kit.
You should be able to have it, grab it. It should be somewhere where you know where it is, readily accessible, and you should be able to walk out the door with it in a few minutes and go and be able to survive for the next 3 days.
We often hear people not take the tropical storms and even Category 1 hurricanes as seriously, but we have to take each and every storm seriously. Look at those hazards it's going to produce.
It is best to store items in airtight plastic bags and to put your entire disaster supplies kit into 1 or 2 easy-to-carry containers, such as a tote or a duffel bag. So what should go in your Go Kit? At a minimum, we can break the essentials down into a top 10 list. The first is water, at least 1 gallon per person per day. Second, food, plenty of non-perishable, easy-to-prepare items that add up to a 3-day supply. Other essentials include health-related items such as a first aid kit, prescription medicines, blankets, and personal hygiene products. In the event of power outages, make sure to have a portable charger for electronic devices. Carry cash, as credit cards and ATMs may not work if power is out. And finally, 2 sets of identifying documents round out the list. 1 set of personal documents, such as a proof of address or a birth certificate, and also a set of emergency contacts.
If you have pets, make sure that you have things prepared and ready for your pets. Also, all of the things that you would have if they have their vaccinations and whatnot, all those things are important if you go, especially if you go to a shelter.
All of these items are inexpensive, easy to find, and most importantly, can save your life in the event that a hurricane threatens or strikes your area. For Weather Nation, I'm meteorologist Shelley Lindblade.
Well, thank you to Weather Nation for those tips. You can find more information and track the storm at WeatherNationTV.com. Please keep your eye on the news and heed the warnings and instructions from your local authorities. Now, probably by the time you're listening to this, it's going to be over, but you never know. The next one's probably coming.
You can find more updates and ideas and all kinds of things on this and other news, plus details and show notes about today's episode, and sign up to receive the newsletter that accompanies this podcast on the 15th of every month by going to floridapodcastingnews.com. We always love your feedback, so join us on Facebook in FPN Insiders. It's a closed group exclusively for fans of the Florida Podcast Network shows. Or if you have news to submit, if you're a podcaster and something cool's going on with your show, with your network, with whatever you're doing, with your meetup group even, you can submit it to us and we will include it in this show. We'll include it in our newsletter. Just email me, Jemmy@FloridaPodcastNetwork.com, so we can help spread the word.
Many thanks to this week's sponsor, Flintstone Media, and be sure to visit all the great shows on the Florida Podcast Network. You can find them, and there's more every day. You can find them at FloridaPodcastNetwork.com. Until next time, thanks for hanging out on the inside of Florida's podcasting industry.
Stay safe, everybody.